Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Lunch and Learn. I'm Lauren Smith with the International Franchise Association, and we have a great 30 minutes lined up for you. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that we are recording today's webinar and will make it available later this evening on community.franchise.org. If you have any questions for today's speakers, please add them to the chat box and they will be addressed toward the end. Today's topic is online to offline, how to supercharge franchise growth with location marketing. And it is brought to us by Uberall. Here to provide today's discussion is Krystal Taing, VP of Solutions at Uberall, and Greg Sterling, digital marketer and local media expert. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you to Uberall for sponsoring today's Lunch and Learn. I'll go ahead and turn things over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lauren. As she said, my name is Krystal Taing. I oversee the solutions team at Uberall, where we're focused on really helping franchise partners and organizations grow their businesses locally. So we're excited to talk about this topic with y'all today. I am joined by a wonderful industry friend, Greg Sterling, who I've personally learned so much from when it comes to local and managing brands online. I'll let you introduce yourself, Greg.
Thanks, Krystal. Yeah, I've been in the industry for 25 or more years now in a variety of capacities as a tech journalist, as a digital marketer, as an analyst and a researcher, all with a focus on the ways in which consumers interact with digital content and then choose businesses mostly in an offline context. So my whole career has really been defined by this online to offline concept.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
All right. So today what we're going to cover is if location-driven growth is relevant. I think you'll learn very quickly the answer is yes.
That's the purpose of this webinar.
Yeah. We'll talk about what Uberall's uncovered as the 5 truths of location-driven growth. And then we'll highlight a couple of case studies about how the franchises we work with have really optimized this and seen some really incredible results. What we want to get started with, though, first is really understanding who we have in the audience and how you would currently rate your franchise's online to offline consumer journey. Of course, this can vary from being incredible to not really having an understanding of how you're performing or how your customers may interact with you. But we're going to go ahead and launch a poll and try and get some feedback from the audience. We'll give you guys a couple minutes to respond. But I think this is quite interesting. I think, Greg, from my perspective, I feel like the journey from online to offline, while me as a marketer is incredibly important and distinct, but I think as a consumer, it's almost as if brands just have to really focus on creating something that's seamless. So it's quite challenging. And then, of course, for a franchise organization, I think that's even adds additional layers of it being quite confusing.
I totally agree. I mean, I think conceptually everybody's on board with this idea, or most people are, but execution is really the big challenge here. And, if you have a very distinct online and versus offline experience, that creates problems and friction for the customer, because coming out of COVID, everybody wants to be able to shop online, pick up in store, go in store, buy online subsequently. And these things need to really be connected to maximize the opportunity and revenue, frankly.
Yeah, I could not agree more. All right, let's see what the results look like. We've got a lot of folks. So we've got them right in the middle. I think it looks like some are rating good and average. We've got a decent amount of businesses that are not sure. Some high performers, some poor. So it's quite interesting, a really, really good mix. And I think that'll help us kind of set the stage for the next couple of points of discussion.
It's probably a reflection of reality, even though the negative assessments are probably closer to reality than the super positive ones.
I would agree. So the impact of location-driven growth on your brand. I think it's important to understand, what do we mean? Like, what is location-driven growth? And what does it take to build a reputable brand? I think when it comes to location marketing, it's really important to understand that consumers need confidence that they're going to have high quality engagement with your brand. And if you think about your favorite retailer or restaurant, what makes them so appealing to you as a consumer? I know I have my favorites, and it really would take so much for that brand to have any negative impact on me because they've won me so quickly as a consumer, and I am a high loyalty customer. But I think it's really hard and really challenging for organizations to reach that level with a consumer, no less a franchise organization where there may be some distributed management and decisions and things like that. So I think it really is important to ensure that brands are providing a reliable and consistent high quality consumer experience. Every time you interact with that customer, they are expecting and understand exactly what you're going to give them. I think there's been some challenges as well when you think about like fast fashion, whether that's cheaply produced, products, maybe challenges with customer service too. I think there's been so much changes with COVID that there are different expectations that consumers have from a brand, which creates a challenge here. I would say, Greg, what's your kind of take on building that reputation?
Well, I would make two comments quickly. One is that the example that you gave of brand affinity, which is so strong that almost nothing can shake it. Consumers only have a small number of brands that they feel that way about. And really what we're talking about is the vast majority of use cases and scenarios where people are trying to find a service or trying to find a retailer, and the connection with the brand is more tentative or tenuous. And so you need to strengthen your brand and make it easy for the consumer to interact with you, which means the seamless integration of these two experiences to build that brand. And brands are critical. They're more and more important than ever. To be recognized on Google, to rank, you really need to build a strong brand. The quick anecdote I would give of a negative experience is, and I'll name names. I apologize if anybody's on here from Gap. Banana Republic. I bought a shirt online at Banana Republic, and it didn't fit me. It was from one of their divisions, which was an outlet, which I didn't fully understand from the website. I went into the store to return it. They said, you can't return it in the store because we have a different system. The back end is disconnected. And I've never shopped at Banana Republic again after that because there was a complete disconnect between online and offline. They should have just said, we don't normally do this. I'll take it. Thank you very much. I would have continued to be a shopper. But that's an example of how your brand can be damaged by two different disconnected experiences.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think it's also kind of lends itself to the rise in, Amazon offering returns inside Kohl's stores and those types of things because they know their consumers crave it, and they will essentially get more customers by streamlining those experiences.
The easier you make it for the customer to interact with you, the more likely they will come back and spend money.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll talk a little bit about these stats that talk about why location is still important. You'll hear us mention a lot of online experiences, but the location and your physical brick and mortar is just as important as ever, I think, in this experience for consumers. So first, a stat on just how many people are searching for open now near me just continues to grow, meaning they're beginning their journey online, but they ultimately want to show up and do business with you in person, whether that is complete a purchase, just pick up a purchase, search for other products or services, but they want to visit a physical location. And again, that kind of goes back to trust and understanding of that brick and mortar. Of course, this is driven a lot by smartphones and social media and multi-channel search. Maybe they saw an ad on a YouTube video, and again, maybe they saw a product or a service and they're not quite familiar with their brand. So they want to come visit to understand what else you have to offer, and if they really can trust you as an organization and they want to do business with you. And then also just the fact that 88% of people that do these searches locally will buy from a store that they found within a week. So again, understanding that while the journey may start or have pieces online, that physical location and the consumer being able to visit and interact with you is incredibly important, and why location-driven growth is really a strong element for franchise organizations.
Stores build trust. Physical presence builds trust. And I'm going to get into these stats a little bit, but in cases where you're trying to drive e-commerce, the store supports e-commerce. People treat these as two disconnected channels, and historically they've had separate KPIs, separate P&Ls, but stores fuel e-commerce. When stores close in a market, e-commerce goes down. So it's a very interesting kind of interaction between the two. So people, there's all this talk about, I mean, even the title of this webinar or one of the sections, does it still matter? E-commerce is a very, very, very small component of overall. I mean, it's billions of dollars, but it's a very small component of overall retail. And when you factor in services, which is 70% of GDP, almost 100% of services are fulfilled offline. It's getting to be the case that certain things can be done, telemedicine and other kinds of services can be delivered online. But e-commerce is a very small portion of this overall pie, which is digitally influenced. It makes sense intuitively. Just think of your own behavior, and Krystal was alluding to this. Most people will look online for information before going to a store, whether that's hours or inventory or some other piece of information. They will use the internet as a way to sort of make their visit more efficient. Interestingly and counterintuitively, multiple surveys show that Gen Z likes shopping in stores more than millennials, more than Gen X. They are much more oriented to physical stores and physical experiences than other generations. That doesn't mean they don't shop online, but they like stores quite a bit. And this is a point that I make repeatedly, and it's not something that occurs to people naturally. Most brand experiences are going to be local, right? People think about brand as an abstraction, as a concept, but most of the experiences which fuel brand perception happen at the local level. The people you interact with in the store or at the business, the quality of service, the quality of the experience, the overall customer experience, that becomes generalized to the brand as a whole. And this is what I just told you about Banana Republic. I had one bad experience at one store with one store manager, and that has tainted my whole perception of the brand. By the same token, the opposite could be true. Great experience, and suddenly I'm a loyalist for that brand. So customer experience matters more than ever. Brand matters more than ever. And consistency between online and offline, as we've already talked about a little bit, is really an important dimension. Online makes promises, offline fulfills promises, and vice versa.
Yeah. I can't understate that enough, how I search on Google so many times for details that I need to use whenever I get to the store. I want to know what the parking lot looks like. If it's a restaurant, I want to check their menu in advance. Even if I don't plan on doing a delivery order or pickup order, I use online to search, and I can't tell you how frustrated I would be or I get if the menu I saw online for the store is not the one that is available whenever I visit. Or there's different types of parking structures or whatever the case is. Anything I need to plan my trip is so critical to get accurate and make visible to me when I'm doing my research as a consumer.
People's time is very limited. It's under pressure. Expectations are created by what's promoted online, and they want to have that experience when they get to the physical location. And so you really need to make sure that there's a coordination between the two, and you're not sort of making representations that don't exist in reality. The menu example is a great one. If I see an old menu online and I want a particular dish and I go into the restaurant, that's going to frustrate me. Maybe I have still a good experience, but it creates an opening for a negative experience that you don't want to really get into if possible.
So we want to talk a little bit about what these 5 truths are. We'll go into these in detail, but overall, this is location anchoring, local first algorithms, in-person authenticity. We'll talk about that a bit. Digital nomadism. I think this lends itself a lot to, as Greg mentioned, like Gen Z and millennials that are traveling a bit and maybe had different lifestyles now than they did 2 years ago. And then ultimately brand solidity and how you make sure that this is a seamless experience, no matter how a consumer is engaging with your business. We will start by talking a little bit about location anchoring and really what this means. So if you think about search and how a consumer might first have an interaction with your brand, I think typically we're thinking Google primarily. That's what everyone's paying attention to. They still are a lion's share of the market. But it's important to think beyond that and where other users and consumers might interact with you. I am a huge TikTok user. So I see and learn about a lot of brands on TikTok. And if there is not an easy way for me to connect with that brand from TikTok to do a search and find their store, I may not end up purchasing or engaging with them beyond that. So it's important, if you do have physical presence, to be able to connect that journey. Or whatever is seen in that TikTok video, especially if it's done by your social media team, is your in-store team, is your retail team kind of connected to what they're showing? And am I going to get that same experience? Is it a promotion? Was it an event that I saw on TikTok? And am I going to see that whenever I get in store? So I think it's consistency from like the basis that we all understand, you know, data consistency, but now expanding, I think, kind of beyond that. What does it look like? And how do brands and franchises really tackle that?
Great example with TikTok or Instagram, which is increasingly where younger people are going to do searches and look for and learn about brands, as you say. If a national team is promoting a particular product and then somebody goes into a local store to get that product and the product is not there, that's a bad experience. So that's where communication is really critical and coordination is really important. But an example of the online offline seamlessness.
Yeah, I think especially if you think about the kind of hype that these social platforms generate around particular products. I am a very big Trader Joe's shopper as well. Half of my grocery list for Trader Joe's comes from what I saw on someone posting on Snapchat or TikTok or Instagram. And when I get in store, they usually have it. If I show up in store and I just saw, you know, an Instagram reel of this meal that I wanted to try and half of the products are out, it is quite disappointing. So I think that's a great point, to make sure that the teams are connected, especially when those social posts that we, you know, maybe consider a little bit separate from search are promoted and, you know, kind of connected to that physical location. So always remember that this thing that's happening online will ultimately drive consumers in store, and it's important to connect those experiences. I will say our next truth is local first algorithms. I think this is something that's not new by any means, but is just as important as ever. And really what this talks about is Google knowing and needing to understand your physical information, making sure your profiles online are complete. And I always say, like, if you have a field in your Google business profile, it should be filled out. Like, there should be no field that you leave for Google to assume or for consumers not to have that information. So making sure that all of your content is there. And again, if you think of, you know, I think kind of the consumer, if I am going and searching for a store, a restaurant, maybe a grocery retailer, and it's really important for me to find one that offers buy online, pick up in store, or one that maybe has a handicap entrance, or one that has free Wi-Fi. Like, there are really important elements that I would like to know in advance, that if I do not see those on Google, I might choose someone else I see that has published that information. So making sure that all of that is there when consumers are making their decision. And this goes beyond just location data. This is, you know, photos and images and understanding what that experience is going to be like. You know, anything else that a customer might need to know should be visible as early on in the journey as possible. So these are things like on your Google profile, your Apple profile, on Facebook, and then of course, consistent across and on your local pages as well. I think everything we've seen just highlights that this is incredibly important, not just to consumers, but to Google and to the search engines and how they rank your data. I was going to say, Greg, anything kind of to add here, areas of importance that
I'm a little bit mindful of the time, since we don't have a ton of time to get through a lot of material, but I would just say everything Krystal said is true. People are going to come to Google or social media before they go to your website. Everything on your website that you want to use to impress or to attract consumers really needs to be in that profile. The profile is your digital storefront. It needs to be as complete as possible, and Google will reward that completeness with better visibility. There's a lot to talk about here, and we could do webinar after webinar about all these things, but Unfortunately, don't have time. You can follow up with Krystal because she can go on at length about all this if you would like to know more after the webinar.
Next truth we want to talk about is in-person authenticity. And really, I think Greg mentioned this, is you've got a large brand. And typically it's important to a consumer to feel connected to that location. So understanding how to empower those local stores, the local communities to connect and build that local experience. I think one of the great things is I am an avid Pilates member, and my local studio is a part of a larger chain. It's a franchise, but they are always putting on local events. We are doing local fundraisers where I feel like I'm part of this really small community, and it absolutely makes a difference. And I don't feel like it's this really large organization. I think the more brands can do that and understand, I think the more that they'll succeed with the consumers that really care about that local awareness. I'm going to move on to truth 4, which is digital nomadism. We talked about this, and it's really about the change in consumer behavior, really understanding that, you know, especially in this remote first world where everyone's working from different places, traveling. I've seen people spend 3 or 6 months, you know, in different countries. And knowing that they still need to learn and engage with brands, I think is important. This just solidifies that they're going to do more searches, maybe temporary searches, and they're not going to be as loyal as some of your other customers, but understanding what they need to know. So great examples are maybe people that want to work from coffee shops. So again, making sure that they can understand and see if you have Wi-Fi. Do they need to be, you know, engage with your brand or have a membership or those types of things in order to come visit you? And then also understanding, hey, these, you know, digital nomads are very busy. I think, Greg, as you mentioned, everyone has a very limited amount of time. I don't want to always go out to eat. I might just want to pick it up on my way home, and I'm an hour away, and I want to know how far I am and if you guys offer pickup. And I might not want to pick up the phone. I might just want to place the order on my app. So again, as a brand, making sure that you're prioritizing these experiences and making it as easy as possible for customers to engage with you and your brand.
I have another example that I'd like to inject at some point. It may not be appropriate here, about another example similar to the brand Banana Republic involving Hilton, where the corporate and the franchisee did not coordinate something. So I can just offer that quickly right now, or we can hold it for later.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it just occurred to me real quickly. I was coming in from Chicago in a cab. I got a notification on the Hilton app: unlock your door, you know, check in, get your digital room key, go straight to your room. I thought, that's great. I haven't used that before. I tried to do that, and it told me I didn't have enough status to do that. They solicited me, and then they told me I couldn't access that because I wasn't a high enough status customer. So that's a corporate problem. I got to the location. They had no clue about any of this. They couldn't help me. They didn't offer to help me. Nothing. It's like, oh, that's the corporate thing. Sorry, you know, welcome to Hilton. And so this was an example of a corporate screw up, but it was creating an expectation that I would have a certain experience at the location that the location wasn't really able to speak to. And so it was a giant kind of, you know, snafu, and it was quite frustrating to me. You know, and Hilton is a very strong and big brand, and I'm not going to not stay at Hilton again, but that's just an example of a lack of coordination between the corporate entity and the franchisee that created a bad experience, which you want to avoid. There's my second. I don't only have negative anecdotes, but that's what came to mind in this instant.
Oh, I think that's perfect. And I think that really segues into the 5th truth, which is brand solidity. And I think understanding and building that trust on the physical location. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but consumers want to go, they want to visit, and they really feel trust when they go to a physical location. I would say maybe in that experience, Greg, like if you didn't show up at the Hilton and you just had this kind of terrible, you know, digital experience, maybe it's booking your travel or something, it could potentially lead you to research another brand. But because you showed up, you connected with the people that were there, it reinstilled your trust that they would take care of it. And I think that is what consumers are really starved for today, is that physical location and understanding, kind of how to connect with brands at their brick and mortars.
You're often trying to move the tepid consumer, the lukewarm consumer, into a more loyal position. That's often the case. You've got your loyalists, and then you've got everybody else below that. And you want to bring that occasional customer into a much more frequent and loyal customer position. And that's part of what we're talking about here today.
Yeah. I will say oftentimes as well, what we see with brands is when you bring more consumers into your physical location, it's typically higher revenue. So even if they began or completed that journey, digitally or online, I do this all the time. I create an order and then I go in store to pick it up, and maybe I'm waiting and I remember there's something else I need, or I'm going to pop in just to pick it up and I grab something else at checkout. I think that's a huge opportunity for retailers that do have a really strong online presence to be able to drive those consumers in store and generate more revenue. Awesome. All right. So as we kind of wrap up this, we just want to highlight that while you are doing this, while brands are trying to understand, the online to offline journey, it's really important to make sure you're measuring how your business is performing, understand how consumers engage, and kind of measure your business. A great way to do this is look at reviews, see the words they're using. If you've got sentiment analysis tools, understand, like, are they really pleased with your buy online, pick up in store experience? Are they really pleased with their takeout order? Or are there areas you really need to lean into? Maybe they're asking for features or services that you don't offer. And of course, ultimately, all of this is to drive more revenue, to drive more customers. So making sure that you're measuring and understand, are these behavior changes and these service changes driving more clicks? Are you getting more visibility on Google? Are you increasing searches and conversions for the terms that you really want to for your organization? So I cannot highlight enough is measure what you're doing and adjust based on those metrics. And there's, of course, a lot of elements that Google's going to drive a lot of this content for you. And then we just wanted to highlight, there's a lot that goes into this, but it really does pay off. We've got a couple of franchise studies. The first one is with a QSR restaurant, KFC, and how they increased their map views, their additional revenue, and ultimately increase their return on investment by streamlining these processes, by ensuring their data was consistent, by enabling their local franchisees to get a little bit more local and engage in this program. There is a bottom line improvement that we see for a lot of franchises. The next one we just wanted to highlight is for F45, a franchise gym. Again, seeing more impressions on Google search by really taking control of their local program, more map impressions, and then even what we see, they're a little bit more of a social brand. We see increase in the amount of engagements that they're getting on Facebook from their posts, from their pages, from all of their content. And this is consistent across all of their locations in terms of streamlining their data.
One quick sort of coda to all of this. Many people will make decisions based entirely on what they see on Google and not click through to your website. So that's why it's also really important to have the most complete information available online on Google and social, if that's an area, a channel for you as well, because people are going to make a lot of choices and decisions based on the information they see there, and they won't necessarily go through and investigate your website. Sometimes they do, often they don't, but that behavior is quite common.
Yeah, I will say, I think we're right at time. I didn't see too many questions come into the chat, but what we can do is, if you have any questions afterwards, have any challenges or things you want to bounce off to us, we will follow up with an email, and our contact information is there. You also are more than welcome to connect with Greg or myself on LinkedIn. And as Greg mentioned, we love talking about local. We love just the consumer behavior around local and how it pertains to driving growth for franchise businesses. And yeah, thank you so much, Greg.
Yes, thank you, Krystal. There's a lot more to learn about all of this. We've just had a short amount of time to give you kind of the surface, but there's much more to investigate here, and it's fascinating. A lot of it is intuitive, but there's a lot to know. Thank you for everybody for joining.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Krystal and Greg. This was excellent content and excellent feedback from all of you. We really do appreciate it. Again, this webinar was recorded, and along with the presentation deck will appear on our website early this evening. You'll be able to find that at community.franchise.org. Thank you very much again to Krystal, Greg, and the Uberall team. And again, thank you to everyone for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe and healthy. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.